Hello everybody, it's Dylan Milks here for Monday, August the 20th, 2012. It's been a while, but I'm happy to be joining you all again. And today I want to talk about, I'm going to title today's video, Richard Duncan versus Ludwig von Mises versus John Maynard Keynes. And it's going to be a battle today in today's video, and I'm not sure who's going to make it out to be the winner, but if you listen to this video, you'll see who's going to win in the end. The last several weeks there, Richard Duncan has been on a lot of these, a lot of the business channels, doing a lot of interviews, sort of promoting his latest book here, which is called The New Depression, The Breakdown of the Paper Money Economy. And I read that book about 2 months ago, and it was just probably the most revealing economics book probably I have ever read as of yet. And really what he does is he really taken his book, his first book, which was really a classic, and again, another must-read here, The Dollar Crisis, which he wrote back in about 2003, 2004. He takes kind of the same foundation and he kind of builds upon it a little bit. And the crux of his book here, The New Depression, The Breakdown of the Paper Money Economy, just to summarize it, is simply that the boom in the economy that we've seen over the last 40 years has really been based on one thing and one thing only, and that is credit expansion, or in other words, debt growth. So what he's saying here is that if you look at the stagnant economy in the world, the stagnant economy in the US, the stagnant economy in Western Europe, in Japan, the reason why it's been so stagnant in the last 4 years, post the financial meltdown, is because credit has not been expanding. And based on our current system, our current economic model, if credit does not expand, the economy does not grow. So if you think about it, if we as individuals, as citizens, and private business, do not take on more debt, our economy collapses. And in fact, best case scenario, it is stagnant, like what it has been the last 4 years. Worst case, it will collapse. And one of the major points he makes in the book is that he shows that since the financial crisis of 2008, private debt, personal debt, as well as business debt has been on the decline, not on the increase, but on the decline. And the government debt, obviously, as we all know, has been on a massive increase. Now, the interesting point he makes is that the amount of decline in private sector debt has been roughly about the same amount as the increase in public sector debt, meaning government debt. And with that leveling off of credit, very little credit growth whatsoever in the last 4 years in most Western world countries, we've seen the results of that. We see the results of that in Europe. We see the results of that in the US. We see the results of that in Japan, obviously, well, essentially Japan for the last 20 years. No growth, no growth. And what he's saying here is that if credit has to grow at least at 3% per year in order to have any semblance of job growth in the US or in Western Europe or whatever it is. Credit has to expand at least 3%, approximately 3%, to have any job growth, real job growth, which will drive, which will get the steamroller of the economy going again. Now, his views are really, I would say, not mainstream at all. In fact, he recognizes the value of the Austrian School of Economics, a way of thinking, based on it's really the founder, really Ludwig von Mises, which I had always been a real strong advocate of governments living within their means, governments only spending what they have and not going in debt, governments playing very little role in the overall economy, governments backing out of the economy, allowing the private sector to flourish and to providing very little regulation and very little roadblocks to the private economy, so that entrepreneurs can go ahead and invest and do what they do best, and that is grow their business and essentially grow the economy. And again, it's an amazing, very revealing and very truthful, I think, economic model. And in fact, quite frankly, if we were starting a new economic system, there's no doubt in my mind that that is the way to go. The Austrian School of Economics, based on the beliefs and the teachings of Ludwig von Mises. However, what Richard Duncan points out, which I think quite correctly and I think quite clearly, is that we're not in a capitalist system anymore. And in fact, we haven't had a capitalism since we went off the gold standard. Because under the gold standard, there were limits as to how much the governments could spend, how much debt we could take on, because it was all based on how much gold we had in the reserves, in the treasury in the U.S. and as well as other Western world nations as well. So there was a limit to debt, the amount of debt and credit that could be created. And once that link was severed, private debt total debt went from about $1 trillion all the way up to about $50 trillion in 40 years. So basically $50 trillion of debt added in 40 years. And this has been responsible for the boom that we've seen in the last 40 years. It's simply just been credit creation. And now compare that to, if you look at now just touch on the Keynesian theory, economic theory, which is simply continual government intervention and management of the economy through debt expenditures. But the key thing with this is the debt expenditures are typically things that are consumptive in nature. In other words, social programs, welfare, food stamps, things that are not investments of government money, or in other words, taxpayers' money. So what Richard Duncan is really saying here is that, if the U.S. or the Western world nations stop these deficits, let's use the U.S. for example, approximately, almost, for the sake of argument, let's just say 10% of the, 8 to 10% of GDP deficit. If you remove that out of the economy right now, the economy would contract by approximately, anywhere from 8 to 10%. And no one in their right mind can tell me that if the economy of the U.S. contracted by 8 to 10% in 1 year, that would somehow create an environment where businesses and entrepreneurs can flourish and can basically have success. In my mind, that paves the foundation for depression, not for entrepreneurial success. And that is, to me, the last thing that we need now is a complete forcing of a balanced budget in order to somehow think that magically this is going to release the private sector and the entrepreneur. Quite frankly, if the economy contracted by 10% and millions more lost their jobs, that is not the environment in which business is going to flourish. Now, his view is that what we should be doing is, rather than spending these trillion-dollar deficits on consumptive things that are consumptive in nature, again, Social Security, food stamps, welfare, all these government programs that just are based on consumption, what we should be doing is stopping that and redirecting those trillion-dollar deficits to things that are investments in nature. Investments, because investments have the potential of generating a return. In other words, and what the few things that he's suggesting here are things like new forms of energy that will drive our economy so that we are no longer dependent on oil from the Middle East. Absolutely great idea. Another things are biotechnology, nanotechnologies, basically 21st century technologies. And folks, if you just think about this for a second, we've been using oil crude oil since what, the mid 1800s, I think, the late 1800s. And here we are in 2012, and we're still dependent. We're still using the same fossil fuel, the same energy source as we have been for the last 150 years. And you're telling me that there is no other better invention out there that for us to use that we can adopt on a grand scale, meaning that we're basically shifting from oil to some other alternative source. You're telling me that with all the smart people we have in the world, with all the scientists, all the brilliant people, that there is no way that we can shift off of oil. I hate to say it, but I don't think so. And same thing with things like nanotechnology and biotechnology, where we can develop cures for diseases, expand people's quality of life and life expectancy greatly. I'm sure that all these cures exist today, and it's just a matter of basically helping and partnering with the private sector to help them develop these cures and these breakthroughs in these fields. And he he's made a really great comparison in some of his TV interviews he's done, and he compares it to the Manhattan Project that went on basically, I guess it was just before World War I World War II, or during World War II, where the U.S. government got all the smartest scientists in the United States, brought them all together, put them in New Mexico, and had them develop, over a very relatively short period of time, had them build the atomic bomb, which of course ended the Second World War. Now, I'm certainly not an advocate of the development of nuclear weapons at this point in time, but the point being is that when you bring together the smartest minds and have a very common focus and a very common and pinpointed goal, that you can develop big things, great things, together with those brilliant people and those brilliant minds. And he's advocating that type of solution for energy, that we need to get people together, again, rounded up by the government, being the leader and partnering with private sector to bring these people together, the smartest minds, in order to say, what, enough is enough. Enough with this foreign oil. Enough with this, dependence on Saudi Arabia and the Middle Eastern countries. We've had it. We're done with this. We are going to get serious, and over the next 10 years, we are going to be independent of Middle Eastern oil or foreign oil at all, altogether. And quite frankly, again, after having read a lot of the writings of the Austrian School of Economics, and having followed a lot of guys like Peter Schiff and Ron Paul, and like I said, I agree completely with them in the context that if we were starting over a new system, that this is what we would want. However, the reality is that we are so far from that. We are so far from that there is no way that we can nicely deleverage 50 or $60 trillion of debt without causing an absolute a depression that is, a super depression that was worse than the 25% unemployment of the Great Depression. I mean, deleveraging a $60 trillion of debt would be basically causing like a 75 or 80% unemployment rate. That's the depression. That's the scale of a depression that this would cause. So we got to work within the parameters we have, and we got to do the best with what we have, even if it's not ideal. And I totally, like I said, I'm very impressed by his book. Absolutely love the book. Would recommend it very highly. Again, it's called The New Depression: The Breakdown of the Paper Money Economy. Highly recommend it. Great reading. And again, if you guys are interested in hearing more about Richard Duncan, you can certainly YouTube him, Google him. He's done a lot of interviews of late, been on a lot of the business shows, and again, highly recommend it. So thanks everybody for watching. Let me know what you think, and we'll talk to you again soon. Take care and bye for now.